Before we begin, let me ask you something. What time is it where you are? And where in the world are you listening from? Leave a comment below. And while you're here, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. These quiet journeys into forgotten history are our shared refuge from the noise of modern life. Now let's drift. It's late afternoon in Constantinople. Not the high towers and domed mosques of the empire's grandeur, but the back alleys, the shaded walkways, where oil splashes on stone, where spice hangs in the air, sharp and sweet, where food isn't a ritual, it's a necessity, a pleasure, a distraction, and a brief rebellion against hunger. Here, under the wide canopy of the Ottoman sky, junk food is not just something from a stall. It's a way to feel full, to feel comforted, to feel human again, even if just for a few minutes. And so we begin. A boy walks barefoot over a stone street still warm from the sun. In one hand a small coin, in the other nothing. Yet he's headed toward the scent, roasted chickpeas, warm, dry and nutty. Vendor sits cross-legged behind a shallow iron pan. It sizzles gently. Chickpeas tumble over one another, roasted with salt and a dash of sumac. Nothing fancy, just heat, rhythm, and time. "Half a handful," the boy says. He passes his coin. The vendor scoops, weighs with his palm, and pours the hot legumes into a fold of paper. The boy walks away, tossing one into his mouth. He smiles, not because it's gourmet, not because it's rare, but because it crackles. It bites back. And in a city ruled by sultans and shadows, a little bite can feel like freedom. On another street, a man slices sheep's liver on a cart, thin pieces marinated in vinegar, red pepper and garlic. He stabs each with a skewer, flicks them into a copper pan. The smell is smoky, sharp, animal. People gather. They don't speak. They simply extend coins and receive meat. No bread, no sauce. Just skewers, the kind you eat standing up, wiping your fingers on your sleeve, watching cats circle beneath your feet, hoping for a drop. To some, it's unclean. To others, it's a memory of the army, the road, the borderlands. A food that fills fast and burns long. This is junk food for the soldier, the night guard, the drunk, and tonight it's yours. In a cramped neighborhood near the harbor, children cluster around an old woman seated beside a brazier. She's boiling something, not for health, not for celebration, but for sweetness, dates, prunes, dried figs, simmered in honey water, then scooped into little bowls and sprinkled with sesame. The children whisper. She doesn't speak, just spoons it out with slow old hands. The sweetness is overwhelming, sticky, almost wrong, but that's the point. After days of lentils and rice, of fish bones and old bread, this is a riot in the mouth, not elegant, but unforgettable. The kind of thing you think about when your belly is full of nothing and your head aches from salt air. A street musician plucks at a lute. Beside him his companion sells halva. Not the hard block from markets. This is warm, fresh from a brass pot, melting slightly at the edges, swirled with pistachio and dark syrup. People buy slivers, hold them in wax paper, let them soften, then break them apart like clay. The sweetness punches hard, then fades. It leaves oil on your fingers and something like peace in your chest. For a minute, the city quiets. The lute keeps playing. Let's stop for a moment at the water's edge. There's a man selling melon slices. They float in a bucket of cold spring water, sliced thick, dusted with salt. He calls out, "For the mouth that thirsts." It sounds poetic, but he's been yelling it all day. You hand him a coin. He hands you a slice, crunchy, wet, cold in the throat. salted just enough to remind you how hot you are. It's not a meal. It's barely food, but it's perfect. Now let's move uphill, to the neighborhood of coppersmiths and scribes. A boy runs past with a greasy triangle in hand, fried dough, hot, puffed, oily, filled with nothing, or sometimes mashed chickpea, depending on the vendor, but always crisp. He bites, steam escapes, he burns his lip, he laughs. This is the joy of cheap food. It doesn't wait for you. You eat it hot or not at all. You wipe your mouth, lick your fingers, and forget your worries for one brief, messy moment. In the early hours of dawn, when the call to prayer echoes off stone walls and the bakers stir their coals, a different kind of junk food appears. Simit, a ring of bread, crusted in sesame, hard on the outside, soft in the center, carried on trays balanced high on the heads of shouting boys. Hot, hot for the early one. Workers grab them, fishermen, teachers, sleepy-eyed mothers carrying baskets. Few slivers of cheese if you're lucky. A bite of tomato, but mostly just the bread. Eaten on the move, no ceremony, no time. It's a poor man's breakfast. But it tastes like sunlight, like a beginning. And as the sun begins to set and the city prepares for night, a smell wafts. From a corner stall, chestnuts roasted over blackened coals, split open to reveal soft, steaming insides, burnt tips, bitter edges, but warm, always warm. People buy them in handfuls, eat them slowly. The skin peels away like a story told too many times. Inside, something soft remains. This is Ottoman junk food. It is salt. It is grease. It is sugar. It is every corner, every voice, every hungry child who couldn't wait until dinner, every mother who fed her son from a paper cone, every traveler who bit into a fried thing and forgot where he was going for a minute. There is no menu, no dining room, no etiquette, just heat, hunger, and whatever the street is offering that day. And as the stars appear over the domes and minarets, the stalls close. But the smell remains in the stone, in the air, in the dreams of the city that never quite stops eating. The city wakes slowly, but the hunger wakes early. It's just past sunrise, the marble of fountains still slick with the breath of night. The mosques are quiet again after the morning call, and the streets are empty, except for those who cannot afford to sleep in. And that is where junk food begins, before the bread is ready, before soup simmers in clay pots, before the meat even sees fire. It begins with the vendors who move like shadows. Men with carts, boys with trays, women crouched behind brazier fires that leave black smudges on their cheeks, each one holding on to a recipe passed from hand to hand, never written, never measured, but known deeply in the body. They do not think of what they sell as junk food. There is no such term here. There is only what you can afford, what fills the stomach and what the body craves after long hours of work. The luxury is not in the ingredient. It's in the permission to eat without formality, without a spoon, without waiting for anyone. Near the edge of the Grand Bazaar, where spice smoke clings to the air like a second skin, a line begins to form beside an iron griddle. Here, an old man makes gozleme, the Ottoman answer to a quick, indulgent snack, a dough as thin as breath, rolled by hands so practiced they no longer need to look. It's laid flat across the griddle, then filled with sharp sheep cheese, mint, sometimes chopped greens, sometimes just onions sautéed with oil, then folded, pressed, and cooked until golden. It's handed to you on cloth or scrap paper, no plate, no cutlery. The cheese burns your tongue. The steam fills your throat. You bite anyway, because it is irresistible. and because by the time you get home it will be cold. So you eat while walking, crumbs falling in your wake. And just like that, for a silver coin, you've tasted something, almost like love. Not far from there, a woman sells makan, the sugary, syrupy paste that lives somewhere between a candy and a promise. 5 brass compartments hold colors: ruby red, emerald green, golden yellow, deep brown, and a violet. So strange it feels like a dare. Each one a different flavor: rosewater, cinnamon, orange peel, fennel, grape molasses. She twirls them together on a stick. Children stare as the colors spiral. There's no chewing, just licking. It's sticky, sweet enough to knock your teeth loose, and it stains your lips purple for the rest of the day. Parents pretend to be annoyed, but even the grumpiest soldier walking by will sometimes glance and buy one for his nephew. Makun is nonsense. It's indulgent, foolish, unnecessary. That's why it's perfect. It doesn't pretend to feed your body, only your delight. Meanwhile, in the Armenian quarter, smoke rises from clay ovens as lamakun is baked on trays no larger than a plate. Thin dough. A thin spread of spiced meat, lamb usually, but never too much, just a smear. Pepper paste, onion, cumin, parsley, sumac, then into the fire, baked in under 2 minutes. It emerges blistered at the edges, hot in the center, and it's rolled, handed to you in paper and gone in 3 bites. It's not a feast. It's a pause, a reward for running errands, for fixing someone's cart axle, for surviving another day of noise, smoke, and the relentless clamor of the empire. You don't sit down to eat this. You eat it between footsteps. This is food for motion. And in a city as alive as Constantinople, motion is everything. By the harbor, salt-crusted air blows through rows of fishermen shouting prices over baskets of silver-scaled anchovies and thick slabs of eel. But beneath them, in a forgotten corner, one man grills midyatava, fried mussels on skewers, each mussel battered lightly, tossed in oil, and skewered hot. He serves them with garlic sauce, lemon, and no questions. You eat standing, elbow to elbow with sailors, scribes, and thieves. The oil drips down your wrist. The lemon stings your lip. The garlic dares anyone to speak to you afterward. It's perfect, savory, hot, slightly dangerous like the sea itself. There is a boy, 10 years old, with a tray of lokma on his head. Tiny golden dough balls, deep-fried and drowned in syrup. Sometimes rose-scented, sometimes just sugar water thick as ink. He walks the streets barefoot, calling softly, "Sweet ones, sweet ones." He sells to guards, to old men, to teenage girls gossiping under vines. Each buyer takes a small cup, 5 or 6 bowls, and eats them without grace. You cannot eat lokma delicately. They stick to your fingers, drip on your robe, but you smile anyway, because sugar, when you haven't had it in days, tastes like forgiveness. Later in the day, the city's rhythm slows. Shadows stretch. Merchants close their shutters. The prayers echo again from high towers, and you pass a cart where a woman fries thin slices of eggplant, zucchini, and pepper, each one dipped in flour, dusted with salt, and cooked in a pan of oil that's been used 100 times too many. She serves them in layers, wrapped in soft bread with crushed garlic and yogurt. It's hot, it's greasy. It drips through your fingers. It's the kind of food you swear you'll never eat again until the next day. Junk food in the Ottoman world isn't something you plan for. It finds you, on a street corner, on a step, at the foot of a mosque. Beneath a balcony where someone above sings a tune that smells like jasmine and smoke. Let's follow an old man down an alleyway where few go. He stops beside a faded stall and nods. A woman behind it, face wrinkled like dried fruit, hands him a bowl keshkek. But this is not the ceremony dish served at weddings. This is junk keshkek, the scraps of wheat, mashed with the fat left from boiled bones, stirred until thick and beige and ugly. It smells strong, but it's warm, and warm food in a cold evening wind is a kind of blanket. The man eats it with a broken spoon, then wipes his beard with his sleeve and walks again. By nightfall, the dessert sellers return. Boza, a thick fermented millet drink somewhere between pudding and beer, is ladled into mugs. Some hate it. Too sour. Too strange. But those who crave it deeply. It's topped with cinnamon, sometimes roasted chickpeas, and served with silence. You sip slowly because it's heavy, and it tastes like winter, like sleep trying to begin, like stories told in rooms. With no heat, no light, only memory. This is what Ottoman junk food was like. Not fast food, but urgent food, not disposable, but temporary. It was a culture of scraps turned into satisfaction, of indulgence born in narrow alleys, of cravings met not with extravagance, but with whatever could be pulled from a pan, a flame, a prayer. There were no wrappers, no logos, no menus, only hands and mouths and hunger and the knowledge that somewhere, on some street, someone was frying something salty, sticky, or sweet enough to make you stop for a moment and just taste. Somewhere deep in the city, under the worn shadow of an old aqueduct, the night presses in with a quiet kind of hunger. This isn't the hunger of starvation or suffering. It's the hunger of boredom, of routine, of the same stew, the same bread, the same tired leftovers every evening. And that's when the real treasures of the Ottoman street food world begin to shine. Because junk food, in this empire of mosques and silk, is not about survival. It's about flavor, distraction, mood, a small rebellion against sameness, a crisp corner of bread that isn't soggy, a sweet that drips down your chin before anyone can stop you, a bite so sour your eyes water, and you go back for more. In the distance, a copper bell rings. It means something is ready. You follow the sound. A narrow street. The air smells of oil and charcoal. There's a young man with a copper tray held low to the ground. On it, kunefe. Not the kind made for aristocrats with pistachio crowns and clotted cream on porcelain. This is the rough version, the junk version, shredded. Phyllo browned in butter, cheese melted inside, and a sugar syrup poured recklessly over it. It's warm and stringy, the edges crisp, the center gooey. He cuts you a square with a dull knife and drops it onto rough paper. Steam rises. The first bite sticks to the roof of your mouth. The cheese stretches. And the sugar, it's too much, overpowering, too sweet. But you don't stop eating, because for a moment you are not in the shadow of broken walls or under the weight of tomorrow's worries. You're somewhere golden, sticky, loud, alive. Further down the hill, near the neighborhoods of the city's poorer artisans, someone is selling something strange and beloved. Pacha soup. It's late, well after the dinner hour. But that's exactly when this appears. The broth is milky, thick with gelatin, made from sheep's feet, boiled for hours, then finished with garlic, vinegar, and hot red pepper oil. This is the junk food of the tired, of the hungover, of the cold. You sip it standing up from a cracked bowl that's been washed too many times. It doesn't look like much, but the heat works through your fingers. The fat lines your ribs. The pepper wakes you, and suddenly the street feels less cruel. You burp, wipe your mouth, thank the seller. You are full now, not in the belly, but in some deeper, quieter way. Not all junk food came from the stalls of the poor. Even the elite in their silken homes and tiled gardens had their vices. Late at night, a eunuch might sneak into the harem-side kitchens and whisper to the cook, "Kabak tatlası," he says, candied pumpkin cut thick, stewed in sugar, then cooled and topped with crushed walnuts. It's not needed. No one is starving, but they want it anyway. To eat with fingers while staring at the moon, to taste something soft and slow in a world full of rules and surveillance, to be a little human, to be a little selfish. And in that quiet courtyard, under domes painted with stars, a slice of pumpkin becomes a rebellion in syrup. Back on the streets the night deepens. The bakers have gone to sleep. But one man, a baker's apprentice, is not sleeping. He is pulling the last burnt loaves from the oven and cutting them into chips, dried bread, old, cracked, unsold. But he knows a trick. He tosses the pieces with dried thyme, salt, and crushed chili, then bags them into cloth sacks. He walks to the mosque steps, where the late-night guards wait, their bellies growling. For a copper coin he gives them a sack. "Eat slow," he says, they bite back. They chew the spiced bread chips through the night, between yawns, between prayers, between thoughts of home. Junk food, yes, but in that hour, the most delicious food in the world. The Greeks in the city have their own answer to the Ottoman junk. Food world axma. A soft, round bread ring, a cousin of the simit but lighter, fluffier, brushed with egg and sesame. Sold early in the morning and often again in the quiet of the night. It's not complicated, it's not fancy, but it sells fast. Mothers tuck them into the hands of toddlers. Young men carry them under their arms, paired with strong tea and awkward conversations with girls they hope to marry. And in this city of flavors and borders and borrowed recipes, Atzma tastes like everything at once. Greek, Turkish, Armenian, poor, rich, old, new. It is the empire in a bite, and no one can eat just one. Then there's the kokoreç, perhaps the most infamous of all Ottoman street foods. Not elegant, not respectable. Often frowned upon by the religious elite, but irresistible. Lamb intestines wrapped around spiced offal, grilled slowly over an open fire, then chopped finely with onions, parsley, and chili. Served on a chunk of bread, hot oil. Dripping down your hands, people line up in the dark to get it. They eat with urgency, like they might be punished for enjoying it too much. Some whisper that this food is dirty, sinful, undignified. But those same people have eaten it, maybe in secret, maybe long ago, maybe after a long night of grief or wine or wandering. And they remember, because you cannot forget kokoreç. It's bold, violent, exhausting, and sometimes exactly what the soul needs. We end tonight not with something salty or spicy, but with something quiet. On the hill near Galata, an old man sells stewed apples, that's all. Apples sliced thick, cooked with sugar, cloves and rose water, served cold, sometimes topped with crushed nuts, sometimes not. You eat it with a spoon, carved from wood. It melts on the tongue. No crunch, no fire, no drama, just warmth. A dessert for the tired heart, for the grandmother watching the city from her window, for the scholar who hasn't eaten since noon, for the child too sick to chew. This too is junk food, because it wasn't planned, it wasn't served on porcelain, it wasn't prayed over. It was made for the moment, for now, for you. And as the moon climbs higher and the fires are doused, the city sleeps, but the memory of its junk food lingers, in your teeth, in your breath, in your pocket maybe. One last bite wrapped in cloth for morning, because even in the empire of sultans, the empire of great banquets and silk-wrapped dates. The most real food was sold on the street, in smoke, in oil, in laughter. The city of Constantinople is quieter now, the streets glazed with moonlight, the sea lapping gently below the harbour walls. In the grand kitchens of the Topkapi Palace, the copper pots have cooled, the fires have gone out, and the scullions sleep beside stacked trays of cleaned dishes. But far from the ceremonial kitchens of the elite, there is still motion, a flicker of flame beneath a cart, a hushed voice selling warmth in paper wraps. And somewhere, always, the smell of fried dough hanging in the air like memory. Because in the Ottoman world, night does not mean hunger ends. It simply means that the kind of hunger changes from the practical to the emotional, from filling the body to feeding the soul. And that is the true purpose of junk food in this empire of contrasts. It is not about indulgence, it is about comfort. It is about need, and need does not sleep. You are walking past a hammam, a bathhouse still glowing from the last guests. The steam has slipped out onto the street, mingling with the cold. A man stands nearby with a pan over coal. He is making ichli köfte, fried bulgur shells filled with spiced meat, pine nuts and onion. He does not shout. He simply waits. Those exiting the hammam, warm and clean and wrapped in cloth, smell the spice. They stop. One kofta is enough to warm the hands. 2 are enough to hush the stomach. It's a delicate thing. Crunchy outside, savory inside, a balance that never lasts long, too hot, too oily, too good. People lean against the bathhouse wall as they eat, eyes closed. No one talks. The köfte are small, but in the silence of the night, they feel immense. Down in the Greek quarter, the streets narrow until you walk single file. Laundry lines hang above your head, cracked shutters, stone steps leading nowhere. There at the foot of a staircase, a boy crouches with a tray. He's selling roasted sunflower seeds. Just that. He roasts them in a pan, then tosses them with sea salt, pours them into paper cones. 5 paras a cone. It is not a meal, but it gives the hands something to do, and the teeth. People buy the seeds, sit on the steps, and spit the husks onto the street without shame. Crack, spit, crack, spit. There's a rhythm to it. A meditation, something ancient, a reminder that food is not only for nourishment, but for habit, for thought, for passing time. Elsewhere, in a plaza that now sleeps, where vendors sold silk and soap by day, one lone cart burns bright. Zerde is being served a rice pudding, but unlike any Western version, this one is yellow from saffron, cooked with water, not milk. Flavored with rosewater and sweetened with grape molasses. The seller ladles it into wooden bowls, shakes a little crushed pistachio on top, and hands it over. The first bite is confusing. Too floral, too sweet. But then, calm. It tastes like gold. Like sleep. Like something distant and royal brought down to your tongue for just a moment. You eat it slowly, one spoonful at a time, while a man nearby tunes an ode and sings to himself in a voice older than the city. There's a fisherman sitting by the Galata Bridge. He's not fishing anymore. He's eating. In his lap, a warm bread roll stuffed with mashed fava beans, garlic, and lemon, fava ekmek. He made it himself. But he sells it too. 1 coin, no questions. People stop. They sit beside him. They eat with him. They pass him coins and nod. He says nothing, but his eyes soften. Fava is not exciting. It is not fried. or sweet or spicy. But it is warm, it is grounding. And in a city always moving, always changing, sometimes warmth is all you want. A mother tucks her children into a corner stall. The wind has picked up. Her hands are red from scrubbing laundry all day. She gives each child a skewer of grilled vegetables, peppers, onion, tomato, all charred. No meat. But the smell, intoxicating. The children eat quietly. No complaints. Because tonight there is something smoky and salty in their mouths, something that didn't come from a pot scraped. Clean. Something that didn't come from yesterday's bread. It came from the fire. And the fire in Ottoman nights is sacred. Now let us travel far beyond the city walls, to the villages, to the caravansaries, to the crossroads of the empire. Where travelers meet and eat. The junk food here is different, less refined. More rugged ayran, a cold yogurt drink, is mixed in clay jugs, salted and poured into tin cups. People drink it with dried meat or thin flatbread brushed with sheep fat and garlic. There's no plate, no ceremony, just gulps and silence. This is the food of the road, of merchants, of soldiers, of those who must keep going. They eat fast, drink cold and move on. But for a moment, they are still. Still enough to taste something real. And in every corner of the empire, from Edirne to Aleppo, Cairo to Sarajevo, there is always someone frying something. Chickpea fritters, olive rolls, donuts soaked in syrup, leftover rice shaped into balls, stuffed with herbs, and dropped into oil that has seen too many nights. Junk food, yes, but also preservation. Invention, joy food made from scraps and spice and memory. Food that knows no table, no cloth, no knife, just hands, and mouths, and hunger, and the need to feel full, not just in the body but in the soul. This is why Ottoman junk food mattered. It was not just what was eaten, it was where and when and why. At the bathhouse door, on the mosque steps, at the end of a long alley where someone waits with a tray and a tired smile. Food meant for no occasion, but every feeling. The food you eat when you're late, when you're lonely, when you're drunk, when you're free. No empire can last forever, but its flavors, those stay in the stones, in the paper wraps, in the oily fingerprints left on a corner wall where someone once stood, licking syrup from their knuckles and smiling. Morning creeps into Constantinople like a shy guest, gentle and grey. The sky is soft and the domes wear mist like silk scarves. And still, the streets remember what was eaten the night before. A crushed cone of sunflower seeds underfoot, a trace of syrup on a railing, ash from a vendor's brazier smeared on the stones. This is a city that eats around the clock. But the line between meal and moment is not always clear. In the Ottoman world, food didn't obey a clock. It obeyed the body, and sometimes the soul. There were days when people worked without pause, without bread, without anything but sweat and sunlight. And when the body snapped, when the knees shook or the stomach folded, that's when junk food appeared like a miracle. A coin pulled from the hem of a robe, a whisper from a boy selling rolls, a hand reaching out with a napkin already stained. And it was enough. It had to be. Down in the spice market, a smell hangs over the morning bustle, warm and nutty. It trails down the alleys and reaches your nose before you turn the corner. It's tahinli chorek, sesame paste rolls, flaky dough, filled with thick tahini mixed with sugar, coiled into spirals, and baked until the top is golden and just shy of burnt. The vendor cuts them in quarters. You don't need a whole one, even a bite fills your throat with richness. The tahini clings to your tongue. Your fingers smell like roasted seeds. The dough leaves flakes on your chest. It's not a breakfast, but it becomes one because it's there, because it's cheap, because it's good. The women buying cinnamon and peppercorns each take one wrapped in paper and eat as they walk, eyes lowered, chewing slowly. There's nothing noble about it, and that's what makes it perfect. Further east in the Armenian baker's lane, a boy with soot-streaked cheeks is selling yesterday's pies. No one buys them when they're fresh, too expensive, too perfect. But today they are broken, cracked at the crust, leaking fig syrup and walnut paste, and suddenly warm their food. He lays them on a wooden board, 3 paras each. The workers from the tanneries come for them, tired men, women with stiff fingers, teenagers with torn sleeves. They eat quietly like they don't deserve sweetness. Like sugar is a memory, not a right, but as the fig hits their teeth and the walnuts crunch, something changes. They chew slower, and in that moment, they are full, not full of food, full of pause. And in the Ottoman Empire, pause was rare. Let's move now to the edge of the Jewish quarter, where pickling barrels stand like guards outside every second door. The picklers have already begun their work. Brine sloshes. Cabbage folds. Beets bleed. And by the street, a girl no older than 8 sells glasses of turşu suyu, pickle brine, not for cooking, for drinking. People swear by it, for the head, for the belly, for the breath. It's sour, cold, violent on the tongue, but addictive. You hand her a coin. She fills a clay cup. You drink, wince and nod. Your eyes water. Your heart pounds. And somehow, you feel clean. It isn't food. It isn't drink. It's something else. And no one questions it, because every empire needs its strange comforts. Back near the harbor, vendors now sell leftover fish, not fresh enough for market, not spoiled enough for discard. They fry them, salt them, wrap them in leaves. Sailors buy them by the handful. No sauces, no plates, no names, just heat. Salt. Flesh. Sometimes they chew the bones, sometimes they spit them out. No one watches. A young boy with a crooked tooth sells sour bread beside them, not baked that way, gone sour from time, but people still buy it. They dip it in the fish oil. They chew, because this is what's left, and what's left is enough. And now let's go underground, literally. Beneath a staircase in a mosque courtyard, under stone arches that leak with condensation, there is a tea seller. He doesn't sell tea. He sells salep, a hot milky drink made from ground orchid root, thick as soup, white as cream, spiced with cinnamon and sweetened with honey. No caffeine, no sharpness, just heat. You hold the cup in both hands, breathe in the steam, close your eyes. The city above you vanishes. And for 5 sips, you are somewhere else, warmer, kinder, quieter. There is an old woman on a rooftop near the Fatih district. She does not sell her food. She leaves it. Each morning she places a tin tray on the ledge. On it, 4 dried apricots, stuffed with crushed almonds and dipped in pomegranate molasses. Why? No one knows. But the tray is always empty by noon. Children sneak up to steal them. Lovers leave poems there. A man once wrote her a song. She never says a word. Junk food, yes. But also ritual. Something sacred in the ordinary. Something soft in a city built on stone. And sometimes the food wasn't real, not in the way you expect. In the poorer quarters, a favorite snack was kokulu tash, scented stones. Yes, stones. They were sold to children who couldn't afford anything else. Small round pebbles soaked in rose water or mastic syrup. Meant to be sucked, not swallowed. They had no nourishment, only taste, only scent, a way to pretend, to play, to feel like you had something. And those children, those stone sucker, grew up remembering, not the stone, but the moment, the pretending, the taste, the joy. Ottoman junk food was never just about food. It was about escape, a tiny rebellion against the harshness of empire, a laugh in the face of structure, a softness in the palm of a soldier's hand. It was how people remembered they were still human, still hungry in ways that had nothing to do with bread, still deserving of sweetness, even if it came in paper, even if it burned the tongue, even if it lasted only seconds, because those seconds mattered, those bites mattered. And if you listened closely and behind the clatter of carts and call to prayer, you'd hear it. The sigh after the first bite, the hum after the last sip, the pause between steps when someone tasted something so good, so unnecessary, so perfect. They just stopped and smiled. The streets had a rhythm of their own, not just from the sound of cartwheels or sandals, or the distant voices echoing from the mosque towers. It was in the way people stopped, for food, for breath, for a moment of warmth that asked for no permission. In the vast Ottoman Empire, where rules and rituals structured every corner of life, from how you bowed to how you bathed, junk food asked nothing. It simply was. It sat in alleys. It glowed beneath oil lamps. It floated on the scent of charcoal and sugar. And though history books may call it snack or street fare, what it really was was freedom. Picture a wooden tray balanced on the head of a boy no older than 10. He walks fast, shouting softly. His voice cracks on the last syllable. Boza, boza. He's selling boza, a fermented wheat drink, somewhere between a thick smoothie and a bubbling porridge, tart on the tongue, heavy in the hand. It's one of the oldest drinks in the city. People love it, or they hate it, but they always remember it. It's made from millet, boiled, fermented, cooled, sweetened. It smells faintly sour. When it's poured, it glugs, slowly. A lazy liquid. At night, men gather in shadowed corners, mugs in hand, sipping boza with roasted chickpeas sprinkled on top. It is not refreshing, it is not elegant, but it is deep. And the deeper you sip, the more you feel rooted, not to the moment, but to something older, something Ottoman, something real. Just a few streets over, there's a man who doesn't shout. He whistles, a low spiraling note that bends like smoke. He sells makun, a sugary paste stretched and swirled on a brass tray with 5 colored sections: red, green, gold, purple, blue. He twirls it around a stick, layer by layer, each flavor sticking to the next. Children crowd around him, clutching coins, pointing with sticky fingers. Grown men stop, pretending to buy for their nephews. The paste shines, it drips, it spins like glass, and when you bite it, it hurts your teeth. But oh, it fills your chest. With the joy of childhood, with the smell of carnivals and market days, with the foolish, honest thrill of sugar on the tongue. Makun is not just candy, it is performance, a little theater of delight. And when the vendor walks away, whistling again, the children chase the echo long after the sugar is gone. Outside the city walls, in dusty border towns where travelers pass with tired feet and wind-worn faces, another kind of junk food emerges. Pied flatbread stretched long, filled with scraps, cheese, minced meat, herbs, or even leftover eggplant stew, folded at the sides and tossed into a clay oven. It isn't wrapped, it isn't weighed, it isn't named, but it's passed from hand to hand, warm, greasy, honest. Caravan guards eat it, so describes and farmers, and children too small to carry baskets, but old enough to hold a corner and nibble. The edges burn slightly. The inside steams. The oil leaves a trace on your wrist, and when you're done, your hands are filthy, but your belly is full. No ceremony. No rules. Just enough. Back in the city, a new smell rises. Burnt sugar. Someone's frying lokma, small balls of dough dropped in oil and drowned in syrup. They sizzle loud, then go quiet. They float. They glisten. It's said that lokma is eaten for celebration, for mourning, for weddings, and for the death of a sultan. But truly, it's eaten for any reason or no reason at all. An old man stands beside a tray of them, watching the world pass. He offers you one, you hesitate. Too sweet, too messy? You bite, and for that bite, the world slows. You are not in a city of tens of thousands. You are in this moment, chewing something impossibly golden, impossibly hot, and when the syrup runs down your lip, he hands you a napkin without looking. As if to say, this happens, this always happens. Now let us visit Üsküdar, across the Bosphorus. Quieter, more reflective. The wind is saltier here. The people speak slower. And the food speaks in whispers. There's a widow who sells nohut dürüm, so simple roll. Boiled chickpeas mashed with garlic, parsley and red pepper, wrapped in thin lavash bread. No signs, no prices. You only know she's there when you see a small queue of dock workers, each holding a piece of newspaper. She wraps the dürüm in the paper, presses it flat with her palm, nods once. The men eat standing up, backs to the sea, looking out, not speaking. It isn't delicious, but it is steady, and on tired days, steady is enough. Some nights after the prayers have ended and the oil lamps are dimmed, someone lights a grill anyway. He's the kebab man, but not the kebabs for feasts or holidays. He makes isot dürüm, rolled flatbreads filled with spicy pepper paste, onions, mint, and leftover bits of fat trimmed from the day's skewers. The heat is sharp. The bread is old. The meat is barely meat, but you bite anyway because sometimes you want the fire. You want your lips to burn. You want your chest to feel alive. You want to cough and say, yes, this is what I needed. And afterward, you drink cold water from a copper cup and smile without knowing why. These foods, these unrecorded, unloved dishes, were not the meals of sultans, but they were the meals of people, of workers, of mothers, of night guards and students and tired men and laughing children. They were foods you could afford, or steal, or trade, or dream of, and when they were gone, your fingers remembered them, your teeth remembered them, your steps led you back without asking, because junk food in the Ottoman world wasn't junk. It was proof. Proof that even in a world of rules and rank and reverence, there was still room to eat what you wanted, when you wanted, how you wanted, with your hands, with your friends, with your heart. In the Ottoman Empire, the elite dined on silver platters behind heavy curtains. They were served by eunuchs and guarded by silence. Dishes were named after victories and poets. But the empire was not built on their feasts. It was built on crumbs, on the food that passed from hand to hand in alleyways, on bites stolen between prayers, on leftovers scraped into something edible, on hunger that had to be soothed fast, without fuss, without fire, without waiting. And so, we walk again, deeper, into the city, not the one of marble, but of smoke and spice. It's almost sunset. The shadows stretch thin over the cobbled roads. Men are rolling up prayer rugs. Children run between fountains. And the smell that begins to rise is unmistakable. Roasted chestnuts. The vendor sits on an upturned crate. His fingers are black from coal dust. The pan on his lap is riddled with holes, sizzling with heat. Chestnuts crack open with a soft hiss. They are not peeled. They are not seasoned, but their smell is a kind of kindness. He places them in paper cones made from old court decrees, bits of imperial law soaked with the scent of nuts and fire. People buy them without stopping. 5 paras, 10 for a double. They eat them walking, burning their fingers, laughing at the pain. It's part of the ritual, the moment when the hard shell splits, and inside, soft, golden meat. Not a meal, but something close to hope. A little farther down, under an archway littered with pigeons, an old man sets up a tray on a crate. He does not call out, does not offer prices. Just lights a candle and waits. He sells kaymaklı ekmek kadayıfı, a dessert made from syrup-soaked bread, layered with clotted cream and crushed nuts. The bread is dry before the syrup, baked stiff, poured over with boiling sugar and lemon, water until it becomes a sponge of sweetness. On top, a slice of kaymak, thick as butter, cool and soft. It's heavy, sticky, sinful. It feels like something stolen from the Sultan's table. Something forbidden. You buy it with the last coin in your purse. Sit on the step. Tear into it with your fingers. It stains your nails. It drips down your wrist. It makes you close your eyes. For a moment, it is not bread, not dessert, but memory. Of something sweet that didn't come from a famine, of something soft that didn't come with guilt. In the textile market, when the stalls have closed and the bolts of silk have been rolled away, there's a woman who sells one thing only: fried zucchini blossoms, kabak çiçeği kızartması. She wakes early, before dawn, to pluck them from her cousin's garden. Opens them by hand, fills them with a mix of rice, dill, and crushed mint, then folds them closed again. They're dipped in batter and fried in oil until they puff and sing. They're sold cold, stacked like gold coins. Wrapped in soft cloth, you buy 4. Eat them with slow reverence. The stuffing crumbles. The batter flakes. There's a hint of bitterness, like the memory of something you forgot to say. They are not luxurious. They are not cheap. They are rare, like peace. At the foot of the Süleymaniye Mosque, a boy sells dried mulberries and walnuts in twin paper cones. The mulberries are golden, slightly sticky. The walnuts are pale and bitter. Together, a strange harmony. They're eaten on the go. By students, by pilgrims, by men who cannot afford lamb. They do not fill the belly. They do not warm the hands, but they crunch, and in the crunch there is satisfaction. In the absence of bread, there is still a sound to chew on. Not all junk food is kind. Some of it is fire. In the Kurdish district, there's a man with a cart, a cloth tied around his head, a slab of stone smeared with pepper paste. He sells biber esmizi on hard flatbread, just that. He spreads it with a spoon, sprinkles sumac, drizzles olive oil. It's red, bright, angry, and you eat it like a challenge. One bite and your eyes water. Your chest heaves. You cough. People cheer. Someone offers water. Someone else tells you to take another bite, and you do, because pain can taste like proof. Proof you're alive. Proof you can still feel. Proof that even fire has flavor. In a back alley, in the shade of a crumbling aqueduct, sits an old man grinding chickpeas with a stone. He makes leblebi tozu, roasted chickpea. Flour mixed with sugar and cinnamon, packed into a pouch, sold by weight. It's dry, bone dry. You place a pinch on your tongue and immediately regret it. Your mouth seizes, your breath disappears, but then a strange calm. It dissolves into warmth, into dust, into something that Tastes like earth. It is not pleasant, but it is true. And truth in snack form is rare. Later that night, you pass through the Greek district again. The old baker is gone, but someone else has taken his place. A woman frying dough twists in a pot of bubbling oil, tulumba, short lengths of dough squeezed from a piping bag, fried until crisp, then dropped into syrup. They crunch on the outside, collapse inside. Syrup explodes across your tongue. You can't eat just one. People around you murmur, eyes closed, forehead shiny. It is not elegant, it is not subtle, but neither is hunger. And sometimes joy is meant to be loud. This is the secret of Ottoman junk food. It is not about taste, it is about timing, context, need. It is what you eat when you can't afford dinner, when you missed lunch, when the city has turned its back, when you need to feel something, even if just for a bite. These foods were born of markets, of borders, of exhaustion, and they never asked your name, never cared where you came from, only that you had a coin, or a friend, or a story worth listening to while the oil hissed. And in the end, that is the heart of it. Ottoman junk food was more than a snack. It was survival. It was community. It was defiance wrapped in paper. It was sweetness after mourning. It was vinegar in the wound. It was laughter between bites. It did not last long, but the taste stayed in the cracks of your teeth, in the folds of your robe. In the silence that followed, when your belly settled and your breath slowed and you remembered, you were still alive, and you had eaten, and it had been good. The sky over Istanbul was a deep shade of plum, not yet night, not still day. That ghostly hour where pigeons circle minarets, where shadows begin to settle in the folds of stone, and the city exhales, quiet, tired, and just a little bit hungry. This was not the time for meals, it was the time for craving. And craving had its own menu. A merchant tucking away his accounts reached into his drawer for a handful of candied almonds. A grandmother beside the hammam slipped a wedge of dried melon to her grandchild. A boatman lit a lantern, then took a slow bite from a square of pressed grape must. This was how the empire fed itself between the lines, through bites that meant nothing and everything. A few streets over, under a faded awning with oil stains that mapped forgotten rainstorms, a thin man stirred a thick pan of molasses and flour. He stood barefoot, his elbows shiny with sweat. The dish was pekmez helvası. Molasses? Helva. There was no butter, no nuts, just flour, sugar, and pekmez, that deep, dark grape molasses born of crushed fruit and waiting. He stirred endlessly with a flat wooden spoon, the flour browning into a soft, sand-colored mass. Children stood nearby, eyes wide. The scent of roasting flour and syrup carried across the square like a song only they could hear. When it was ready, he poured the sticky mixture into a wooden tray, cut it into squares with the back of his spoon, and handed them out. No plates. No wrapping, just hands. It was heavy, sticky, dense with sweetness and history, and it tasted like winter, like warmth found between hunger and hope. Near the hippodrome, there was a vendor whose only product was kestane shekeri, candied chestnuts, not roasted, not salted, but boiled in syrup until they glowed like amber. He sold them from a copper dish lined with linen. Each chestnut sat like a jewel, round, sticky, barely holding its shape. Women in silk robes stopped to buy two, just two. It was the kind of indulgence you didn't talk about, not sweet enough to be dessert, not plain enough to be dismissed. You bit into one and it collapsed on your tongue, leaving behind sugar and smoke and something old, Chestnuts have always been peasant food. But here they were transformed, glorified, preserved in syrup as though time had no teeth. As the wind rolled in from the Golden Horn, carrying the scent of brine and wood smoke, another vendor took his place beside the fishmongers, a boy with sunburnt cheeks and a row of skewered anchovies dusted with cumin and flour. Hamzi Tava. He didn't fry them fresh. He carried them cold, already crisped, wrapped in cloth and stacked like books. They were pungent, salty, the kind of food you could eat standing in a puddle, head bowed, coins pressed between two fingers, and people did. A young woman in mourning. A janissary with blood on his boots, an apprentice too late for dinner. Each one took a skewer, chewed, swallowed, left. It wasn't conversation. It wasn't even comfort. It was necessity. It was motion. And that sometimes was enough. A little. Before midnight, a line began to form near the bazaar gates. No sign, no lights, only the knowledge passed from mouth to mouth that the Sutlu Musirja would arrive soon. He came with a pot, a large brass pot of sweet milk, boiled with corn kernels until thick and golden. No spices, no salt, just sweetness and steam. He didn't shout, didn't call, just ladled it into clay bowls for the handful of people waiting, tanners, midwives, old men in prayer cloaks, those who worked when others slept. The milk burned the tongue, but they drank it anyway, eyes closed. A sip, a breath, a silence. And maybe that was the real meal, the pause between sips, a moment so simple that it couldn't be taxed or stolen, or doubted. On the edge of Galata, in the Armenian quarter, a girl with ink-stained fingers sold fruit leather, not packaged, not sliced, just torn in sheets and tied with thread. Pestle-dried layers of plum or apricot pulp, rolled thin, sometimes pressed with nuts, sweet and tangy, sticky and strange. She didn't speak, just pointed to each flavor. Apricot with walnut, mulberry with sesame, grape with fig seeds. People chose by color, not by name. It wasn't something you ate in front of others. You tucked it into your sleeve, chewed it later, alone, when the city grew too loud, fruit reduced to memory. Sugar wrapped in silence. Back across the Bosphorus near a quiet ferry station, an old man prepared something odd. Dough balls soaked in vinegar, then fried. No one knew what to call them. They had no name, just a taste. Hot, sour, greasy. Utterly confusing, utterly addictive. He only made 10 per night. When they were gone, he vanished. People lined up anyway. Because flavor doesn't always need explanation, only repetition. The empire had its dishes, its official meals, its courts and kitchens and cooks who wore badges like armor. But junk food, Ottoman junk food, lived below the ledgers, below the table, below the notice of men who wrote history with clean hands. It was survival wrapped in wax paper, memory pressed between layers of dough, hope spooned out of a copper bowl under. A broken lantern. It was the answer to every tired stomach, every skipped meal, every pocket with just one coin left. And now, walking back toward the city's heart, the wind sharper, the streets quieter, you feel it too, that gentle, aching hunger, not for food but for a story, a flavor, a moment, and perhaps that's the final truth. Ottoman junk food was not meant to last. It was meant to be found, bitten, remembered, like a whisper passed in an alley, like a lantern flickering before dawn. Not fine, not clean, but real, and sometimes real is all you need. The deeper you wander through the belly of the Ottoman city, the more it begins to feel like a living pantry, not a neat one, not the kind lined with jars and order, but a pantry in motion, smoky, loud, spontaneous, one that changes depending on who's hungry, what's left over, and what time the moon rises. And at the very center of this chaotic hunger was a truth. If you waited long enough, someone would always feed you, not out of charity, not for free. But because hunger was understood here, like sleep, like grief, like prayer, you fed others because you too had once been fed. In a crumbling alley beside a bookseller's shop, an old woman sat with a copper tray on her knees. The tray held one thing, kesari, made from grated carrots cooked down with sugar, spiced with cinnamon and cloves, then rolled in shredded coconut and sliced into bars. It wasn't soft like a pudding. It wasn't hard like a candy. It was in between, something to gnaw, to chew slowly while reading or while walking between prayers. Children called it sweet root. Doctors recommended it to strengthen blood. Sailors wrapped it in cloth and carried it on long journeys. And yet to bite into it was to taste the ground, earthy, sweet, stubborn, like a root that refused to be forgotten. It stuck in your teeth. It stayed, like an old memory you didn't want, but couldn't throw away. Near the edge of the Jewish quarter, down a narrow slope that led to the laundry wells, a boy sold rice, fritters pirinç köftesi, cold balls of yesterday's rice mashed with a bit of cheese or egg, flattened and fried again in shallow oil. They were not elegant. They were not even round, just flattened lumps, browned unevenly, handed out in scraps of paper that still held traces of ink. But the taste, there was something comforting in the crisped edges, the soft middle, the salt. You could imagine a mother had made them late at night, with whatever she could find. And perhaps that was the point. Junk food was often the taste of trying to stretch the last handful of rice, trying to feed 5 mouths with 2 coins, trying to smile through a famine. Not far from there, in a courtyard where 2 fig trees bent over a cracked fountain, a man opened a tin and revealed something that sparkled faintly. Rose petal jam, not the kind served in glass dishes at morning meals. This was thick, sugared beyond logic, the petals barely visible under the weight of time. He spread it on stale bread, called it soldier's breakfast. People bought slices, not out of hunger but nostalgia, for the gardens of their childhood, for the smell of their mother's robes, for the taste of something impossibly tender, preserved in syrup, resisting the decay of the world. One bite, and the world slowed. It wasn't just sweet, it was safe. As evening prayers ended and feet shuffled back onto the streets, another vendor lit a low flame under a dented pot and stirred a mix of rice flour and sugar. He was making muhallebi, milk pudding, but this version was different. Street-style, cooked with water instead of milk, thickened poorly, poured into chipped bowls and dusted with cinnamon. It wobbled when touched, tasted like almost nothing, but cost only 1 para. Children bought it with dirty fingers. Old men bought it for the memory of better muhallebi. Mothers bought it for silence, a way to keep children quiet while they bargained in the fish market. And in that nothingness, that bland, forgettable flavor, there was a strange kind of peace, because sometimes you don't need your food to sing. You need it to wait with you, quietly, patiently. Not every snack lived on land. At the ferry docks of Kadıköy, fishermen sold sardalya ekmeği, sardines pressed between halves of bread with lemon and onion. No cooking, no wrapping, just raw salt and sea and bread left in the sun. The sardines glittered in the fading light. Their smell was defiance. Their bones were ignored. People ate them standing by the water, watching the boats. It was food for movement, for transition, for people who couldn't sit still long enough to eat a real meal, who had ships to catch, lovers to forget, debts to repay. You didn't talk while eating it. You just looked at the sea and let it tell you something you weren't ready to hear. On certain nights when the streets quieted and the wind shifted eastward, you could catch the scent of something bitter, turşu suyu, pickle juice, sold by other glass from a large sweating barrel filled with green plums, cucumbers, garlic and chilies, floating like ghosts. You didn't chew it. You drank it, cold, salty, electric. It hit the back of your throat and made your eyes sting. Why would anyone pay to drink such a thing? Because it woke you, because it reminded you that your body still had nerves, because after a long day of sweet and soft and bland, you needed something sharp, something that bit back, and sometimes, oddly, it helped your heart too. In the corner of a quiet square, a man sliced strips from a sheet of dried meat. Pastrma. He didn't serve it with bread. Didn't fry it, just sliced it thin and placed it on a leaf. The meat was dark, edges ringed with red spice. The scent strong enough to linger on your fingers for days. You ate it slowly, letting the fat melt. You didn't speak while chewing. Was a meat that demanded attention, that whispered of deserts, of caravans, of salt and survival. You didn't need much. 2 pieces were enough, but even after you kept tasting it, in your breath, in your sweat, in your dreams. This is what Ottoman junk food was made of. Not ingredients, but moments. Food for a pause between prayers, a walk through a storm, a laugh you hadn't earned, a hunger that wouldn't leave. It didn't care about tables, didn't ask for plates, it just showed up, in the hands of strangers, on trays under stairwells, in pouches tied with twine. It was the language of the city, and if you listened, you could hear it whisper, "You are still here. You are not alone. Eat, then carry on." It's well past midnight now. The stones underfoot are cold. You can hear the echo of your own footsteps in the alleyways, accompanied only by the soft brush of leaves and the occasional stir of wind. Even the cats, once bold and noisy scavengers, around the fish carts have curled into silence, but the city never truly sleeps, and neither does its hunger. There are still foods waiting to be eaten. Not meals, but murmurs. Not courses, but clues to how ordinary people kept themselves going long after the grand kitchens closed for the night. Because in the Ottoman world, junk food wasn't just a treat. It was survival, disguised as indulgence. You walk past a water fountain, the marble stained with centuries of hands and mouths. Beside it sits a woman with a cloth bundle in her lap. Inside, roasted chickpeas, leblebi, plain, salted and honey-coated. She scoops them into paper twists, folded from discarded ledgers. 3 kinds, 3 coins, 3 different memories. The plain ones are dry, barely flavored, something to chew when there's nothing else to do. The salted ones are sharper, meant for long walks, shared with silence. The honey-coated, those are for moments, when you want to pretend life is sweet. No one speaks as they buy. The sound of chickpeas rattling in the paper is enough. You carry them in your pocket, feeling them shift with every step, a small comfort against a large night. Farther down, by a small bridge no longer used for carts, a young man sells chi köfte, the older version, the raw version, kneaded for hours with bulgur, tomato paste, chili and dried mint. There is no meat anymore, not in this one. It's been replaced by intensity. He rolls them into tight little fingers, presses them into lettuce leaves and sprinkles lemon over the top. They're hot, not in temperature but in spirit. Spicy, tangy, herbal, they don't fill your belly. They ignite it. You don't eat many, 2 or 3 at most. Enough to wake your mouth, enough to remind your senses that they still work. It's not a snack for peace, it's for passion, for poetry, the kind of food a poor man might eat before walking to propose marriage, to give him the illusion of courage. The streets are emptier now, but in a shadowed archway, a boy squats beside a round tin, selling what looks like dark. Little bricks wrapped in parchment, dört pekmezi karışımı, thick molasses cubes made from mulberry syrup, walnut paste and sesame. They are dense, almost too dense. You bite into one and feel it stick to every part of your teeth. It doesn't melt, it resists. And yet, there's something satisfying about its refusal to go down easy. It forces you to chew, to think, to pause. You lean against a pillar and finish it slowly, watching the lantern light shimmer on the damp stones. It's not pretty food, but it lingers in your mouth, in your thoughts, in your night. Across the district, behind the baths, an elderly vendor unlocks the iron grate on her portable stove. She sells only one thing, salep. Hot, milky, dusted with cinnamon, made from the powdered roots of wild orchids. It's not thick like porridge, not watery like tea. It sits in the middle, a drink you hold in both hands, sipping slowly so you ha. Don't scald your tongue. She doesn't smile. She doesn't ask what you want. She knows because only certain people come this late. Tired ones, cold ones, ones with stories they won't tell. You sip the salep while watching the steam rise into the night air. The orchid root makes it smooth. The cinnamon makes it smell like forgiveness. And for a few moments time moves slower. Your thoughts soften. Your body forgets its aches. That's what salep was for. Not to feed you, but to soothe you. Near, the mosque steps. A man with trembling hands slices slivers of halva from a massive block. Not the crumbly sesame kind. This one is softer, made from wheat flour, sugar and butter, burnt just slightly on the bottom. Helvese. He cuts each piece with a wire, not a knife, stacks them neatly on waxy paper, folds the corners inward. With fingers that have done this 1,000 times, the taste is old-fashioned. The kind your grandfather might remember from wartime. The kind made in mourning houses after prayers. People don't speak as they eat it. It feels too sacred. You take one slice and let it dissolve on your tongue. It tastes like dust and devotion, like grief sweetened with sugar, and that somehow is comforting. There's one more thing you pass as the night deepens. A cart covered in brass bells. No one speaks. No one calls out. But the bells tinkle gently as a man ladles out slush from a covered basin. Beachy, beachy, crushed ice, sweetened rose syrup, tiny cubes of jelly, and a dusting of starch powder over the top. It shouldn't make sense. It's cold, it's wet, it's barely food, and yet the first spoonful is like a memory of childhood you didn't know you had. The syrup is faint. The jelly sticks. The ice crunches. You close your eyes between bites, not because it's luxurious, but because it's delicate. The kind of food you eat when you're trying to be kind to yourself. Even if just for a moment, the streets begin to empty. Vendors fold up cloths, douse coals, and gather their trays. The smells linger even as the people leave. Cinnamon, smoke, molasses, brine, and the hunger. It quiets, not because it's gone, but because it's been heard. This was junk food in the Ottoman world, not designed, not curated, just given. Passed through alleyways, wrapped in paper, remembered in stories, not praised by poets, not documented by scholars, but vital, real, shared. and now you too carry it in your fingers, on your breath, in the quiet fullness of a night spent wandering through forgotten flavors. The call to Fajr lingers on the horizon, though no muezzin has yet raised his voice. The city is wrapped in that trembling stillness before the dawn, when even time seems to hesitate, unsure whether to take the next step forward or let the world rest just a moment longer. It's in this pause, long before the baker lights his oven, before the first merchant rolls up his shutter, that a different kind of hunger stirs, a soft, quiet craving, one not born of need, but of memory. And Ottoman junk food in this sliver of silence answered it with a whisper rather than a shout, because not all cravings arrive with noise. Some creep in like breath on cold glass, some settle into your bones, down a side alley near the spice market, long before the scent of saffron and cinnamon claims the air. A figure crouches behind a small brazier. The coals are barely glowing, the heat just enough to warm rather than burn. In a small copper pan he roasts pumpkin seeds, kabak çekirdeği. The seeds pop gently, releasing a faint nutty aroma. He doesn't serve them in bags or pouches. Just a cone of paper, twisted from yesterday's price lists or old prayer books. Customers don't need to ask. They walk by, nod, drop a coin, and accept the paper cone without a word. They walk on, cracking shells with their teeth, spitting husks into the street, biting into the oily, earthy core. It's not about the food. It's about the rhythm. Pop, crack, chew, repeat. This was not a snack meant for feasts. It was for solitude, for pacing thoughts, for keeping one's hands busy while the heart waits for something, or someone, that may never arrive. A few corners away, a young girl with a basket of stale simit sits cross-legged on a step, pouring hot grape molasses over torn chunks of bread. Simit pekmez karışımı, too dry to eat plain, too sweet to be a meal. She soaks the simit pieces until they darken, softening just enough to chew. It's a food made from rejection, yesterday's bread and leftover syrup, but eaten with delight. Children gather near her, not to buy, but to watch, because the way she eats it, with ceremony, with silence, turns it into something more than scraps. And in their wide eyes, you see the unspoken truth. The poorest meals often teach the deepest lessons. By the city walls, beside an old stone arch where pigeons sleep in hollows carved by forgotten hands, a street vendor sells a confection with no name, just boiled sugar, pulled into long strands, wrapped around sticks like thread. He calls it white rope. Others call it ip shekeri. It shimmers faintly in the early light, translucent and trembling, melting the moment it touches the tongue. There is no flavor, no spice, just sweetness. But that's enough. For a child, it is magic. For a laborer, it is energy. For the elderly, it is memory softened by sugar. He makes no more than a dozen sticks, and when they're gone, so is he. No mark left behind but the quiet crunch of sugar between teeth. Near the eastern gate, beside a resting place where travelers dismount and pray, a woman tends a tiny pot of coffee, but not for drinking. She's boiling dates, soft brown dates in bitter black coffee, cooked until the liquid thickens and coats the fruit in a glaze as dark as night. Hurmalı kahve tatlısı. It's not listed in recipe books. No palace chef would claim it. But those who have tasted it never forget. The bitterness of the coffee meets the dense sweetness of the dates. A dessert that tastes like goodbye letters and unread poems. She spoons them out one by one. No bowl, just palm to palm. You eat it slowly. And when it's gone, Your fingers smell like sorrow and smoke. Back in the heart of the city, under a ruined archway once painted with gold, a man sells burned sugar, yannick shaker, crystallized lumps made by letting sugar caramelize past sweetness into something dark, smoky, bitter. He drops a piece into your hand. It sticks slightly. You taste it, and your first thought is why, but then the bitterness fades, replaced by depth, a flavor that feels more like sound than taste, like the low hum of a cello, like the pause between thunder and rain. It's not good, but it's honest, and sometimes that's all you want from your food. Beyond the city's pulse, toward the docks where the fishermen sleep with their nets wrapped like blankets, a boy sits on an overturned barrel, crushing black olives into bread with his fingers. No oil, no herbs, just salt and pressure. The olives stain the bread dark. The texture turns strange, soft in places, rough in others. It's a bitter, briny thing, but it holds you. Each bite is a reminder. This city grew on salt, on trade, on survival. You finish the last mouthful slowly, licking your fingers, and as you do, you see a fisherman watching, nodding as if to say, yes, that's the right way. The right way to eat a morning with no coin, no meal, just hunger and habit. Finally, as the sky shifts from ink to indigo, and the birds begin their early high arguments, you pass a narrow passage lit by one dim lamp. There, an old woman stirs a thick paste made of tahini and molasses over coals. Tahini pekmez. She spreads it onto thin sheets of dried lavash, then rolls them into tubes. They're heavy, oily, sticky. You take one, and it warms your hand. Bite into it, and the paste clings to your teeth, to your tongue, to the back of your throat. It is not pleasant. It is not light, but it stays with you. A meal made from ground sesame and crushed grapes, two of the oldest foods in the world, bound by time, bound by fire. And in that stickiness is history. In that weight, survival. These were the whispers of a city that never slept, the foods that never made it into scrolls or court poems, the flavors too humble for feasts, too fleeting for cookbooks. But still, they lived in the cracked hands of vendors, in the wide eyes of children, in the quiet corners of early morning Istanbul. And as you walk now, belly half full, fingers scented with sugar and salt and sesame, you understand Ottoman junk food wasn't about indulgence. It was about continuity, carrying a little comfort into the next breath, the next prayer, the next burden, not to forget your hunger, but to remember you were still alive. The sun finally peeks through the fabric of the sky, not with fire, but with gentleness, spreading pale orange across the roofs of domed mosques and the crooked minarets that still lean into the heavens like questions unanswered. The city is waking, now but slowly, and so is its hunger, not the grand hunger that gathers around platters and feasts, but the quiet kind that clings to a passerby like smoke, the kind that wants something small, something cheap, something that tastes like home, even if you've forgotten where that is. This is where the final chapter of the night's cuisine lingers, among the street sellers and fire carriers, the paper-wrapped bundles, the pockets of forgotten flavor. Ottoman junk food was never about satisfying the stomach. It was about tending to the soul in passing moments. In a small corner between a tannery and a spice shop still shuttered with wooden planks, a man pushes a heavy cart with only one offering. Zencefili şeker ginger candy. It's cloudy and hard, pressed into uneven rectangles. Dusty with powdered sugar, or sometimes not dusted at all, left to crackle and sweat in the morning air. You buy a piece and hold it between your fingers. It's almost too firm to bite, but when you do, it breaks with a sharp snap, flooding. your mouth with the bitterness and fire of ginger. Beneath it a reluctant sweetness follows. It burns, slightly. But you welcome it, because in this city, this empire in miniature, you're always chasing warmth. In your food, in your words, in the stranger's nod across the courtyard, a little farther on, tucked beneath a crumbling aqueduct whose stones sweat with morning dew, a woman arranges pieces of kevizli sukuk, walnuts suspended in thickened, grape must strung like sausages and sliced into little coins. They glisten in the early sun. Not quite candy, not quite dried fruit, just preserved sweetness bound by time and effort. They're chewy, nutty and rich, but never overwhelming. You eat one, then another and another, and soon you forget why you were walking in the first place, because there's something meditative about chewing through memory. Each bite a pulse from an older world, one where preservation wasn't a technique, but a necessity. Beyond the aqueduct, in a square slowly filling with cartwheels and soft vendor calls, a boy opens a clay jar and begins scooping out spoonfuls of thick yellow kaimak, clotted cream, onto old bread. No honey, no syrup, just the cream and the stale bread. A bite of richness paired with dryness. The bread crumbles as you chew. The cream sticks to the roof of your mouth. You don't mind, because here even stale bread finds purpose. And even silence is seasoned. A group of old men nod as they eat beside you. No one speaks. They just chew and swallow and remember something they will never say aloud. To the west, by the ferry landing, an older vendor has built a small coal fire beside the stone steps. On a copper griddle, he lays down katma, a flaky pastry filled with a smear of crushed pistachio and sugar. It hisses as it cooks, the sugar melting into a light caramel. He flips it with slow, careful hands, letting the scent drift toward the docks where fishermen are just beginning their day. You take one piece. It's hot and sticky, the edges crisp, the center warm and giving. It leaves sugar on your fingertips and a trace of something else, comfort maybe. Or the reminder that sweetness, when given without ceremony, tastes more sincere. As you wipe your hands on your sleeve and continue onward, you pass a woman seated behind a woven basket filled with dried apricot rolls, pressed sheets of sun-dried apricot pulp stacked like scrolls. She unrolls one for you and tears it into strips. It's sour, more tart than sweet, sticky in your teeth, but strangely addictive. This is not the flavor of dessert. This is the flavor of a long journey, of riders on horseback, carrying snacks that keep their spirits from crumbling across dry plains. And in that first bite, you feel something ancient move in your chest, like a memory of motion. Down another lane, near the school where the doors are still locked and the blackboards unwashed, a boy stirs something thick and black in a pot over kindling. Licorice syrup. He pours a few spoonfuls into a chipped bowl and passes it over. You sip it and wince. It's strong like soil soaked in herbs. Anise, maybe, and a bitterness that coats the tongue for minutes. Children wouldn't dare drink it, but elders swear by it. It clears the throat, warms the belly, reminds you that not all healing comes sweetly. Some comfort arrives cloaked in strength. Near the public baths, now quiet before their morning wash, a man slices fried ichli köfte in half and places them on a cloth. Spiced bulgur shells filled with bits of leftover lamb fat, onions, pepper, and crushed pine nuts. It's heavy, greasy, intense. You eat it, sitting on a low wall, and the fat drips onto your sleeve, but you don't mind because sometimes junk food isn't about joy. It's about staying upright. A brief indulgence that steadies you before the work ahead. A silent handshake between the eater and the street. A little further down, a woman stirs a basin of helva topu, halva dough rolled into dense little balls, coated in ground sesame, or powdered sugar. You take one. It crumbles before you even chew, dissolving like sand across your tongue. The flavor is grainy, soft, and calming. You eat it slowly, watching the smoke of another vendor curl into the pale sky. These are the snacks of quiet victories, the kind you eat after finishing a task, or before taking a deep breath, or when you have no idea what's next, but you're still here. All around you now, the morning gathers. Vendors stretch their backs. Boys sweep away the previous night's ash. Pigeons pick at crumbs left behind. From 1,000 small stories. And still the smells remain: sesame, smoke, sugar, spice. Traces of lives lived not in banquets, but in moments. Not around tables, but on stones. Not with gold, but with care. This was Ottoman junk food. The snack of sailors, tailors, gravediggers, poets, servants, and schoolboys, of mourners and lovers, of tired feet and stubborn hope. Not luxury, not perfection, but presence, sustenance, kindness folded into paper and eaten in silence. And now, as you walk with crumbs on your sleeve and warmth in your stomach, you carry it too, the legacy of ordinary hunger, met by extraordinary simplicity. The sun was highest now, its light almost cruel in how it exposed every stone crack, every faded corner of a shop sign, every sagging awning, every silent face. The city was not dead, but resting, not asleep, but simply waiting out the heat. This was the slow hour, the moment when no real food is prepared. Not even the baker lifts his paddle, not even the butcher sharpens his knife. But junk food, that strange secret companion of ordinary people, finds a way to survive even in the stillness. It adapts, shrinks, cools, fades into quiet corners, always ready to reappear as soon as the body or the soul asks for something. Inside a shadowed courtyard, a girl leans against a fig tree, peeling roasted chestnuts. Kestane kebab. She doesn't sell them, just eats slowly, one by one, splitting the skin with her thumb, revealing the warm, soft insides. They've gone a little cold now, but still. The flavor is smoky, sweet, and almost meaty. They're humble, but in her mouth they become golden. A neighbor's child sneaks up behind her and begs for one. She gives it wordlessly. Then another, and another. By the time she eats the last, her belly is barely touched, but her heart is full in the way only small shared food can allow. Across town, where pigeons crowd on minaret ledges, and elderly men sit in doorways with their worry beads, a boy carries a tray of zarda. This saffron rice pudding made the cheapest way. No almonds, no fruit, just overcooked rice stained yellow with weak saffron and streaked with sugar, is not what royal kitchens would have allowed. But here, in its worn tin tray, it is gold. Gold for the poor. He sells it in chipped ceramic bowls, meant to be returned, but often not. Some eat it walking, others sitting. The rice is gummy. The sugar crystallized in patches, yet still thus it comforts. It tastes like warmth after morning, like a sunbeam on a cold wall. People don't remember what was in it. They remember how it made them feel. Down near the dye-maker's quarter, where cloths of crimson and deep blue hang like tired flags across alleys, a narrow-faced man sells sticks of macerated quince, Iva makunu, sticky, dark amber, rolled onto splinters of wood and left to dry just long enough to become leathery. The taste is confusing, sharp, then flat, then overwhelming. It stains the teeth, it tangles the tongue, but it keeps well, never spoils. Children trade it for chalk. Adults chew it absent-mindedly while waiting for couriers or customers. Lovers sometimes leave it wrapped in leaves with clumsy notes. It is not pretty, but it is honest, and it lasts. Inside a printing shop where the smell of ink and dust mingles with sweat and candle smoke, two workers take turns slicing thin wheels of pestle, dried fruit leather made from mulberries, grapes, or plums. They cut it into strips and press crushed hazelnuts or cracked almonds into its folds. There's no clean way to eat it, for it sticks to everything, to fingers, to sleeves, to lips. But that's part of the pleasure. Each bite is effort, a chew, a stretch, a smear, followed by a burst of memory, of orchards, of seasons, of mothers' hands spreading paste onto drying racks in the courtyard. You chew, and by the end you feel full, not from the food, from the past it brought back. Not far from the mosque's shaded portico, a man in a patched vest sells skewers of dried, sugared melon slices, kavun kurusu, shekeli. Hard at the edges, chewy in the middle, the sugar coating uneven. Some slices, so tough they could chip a tooth. He ties them together in fans, 4 or 5 pieces each, and hangs them from a wooden pole like flags of some forgotten province. People buy them not because they're good, but because they're strange, because they're old, because no one else sells them anymore. The taste isn't of melon, it's of dust and sun and distant summers, and somehow that is enough. As the light softens toward late afternoon, the city stirs again, the clang of metal, the rush of water, the cry of merchants calling out prices once more. But even as real food returns to the stalls, grilled meat, lentil stews, bubbling pans of tomato, the people still crave the small things, because junk food in the Ottoman world was not about volume. It was about moments. The roasted seed shared during gossip, the hardened fig chewed while watching the sky change, the cheap halva stolen from a sibling's pocket. And the flavors didn't need to be good. They needed to be true. True to a place, true to a feeling, true to the invisible map we all carry of smells, sounds, textures, rituals. Near the madrasa, under the acacia trees, a girl sits with a plate of yoğurt tatlısı, tiny squares of yogurt cake soaked in syrup. They wobble in the breeze, one already crushed in her hand. They don't hold their shape well. The syrup oozes from the edges. The sponge is too dry in places, too wet in others. And yet, she eats with joy, because these weren't made by a chef. They were made by her older cousin, using a charcoal stove and a metal lid weighted with bricks. And the taste carries her back, to the laughter of cousins, to stories told under blankets, to songs half-remembered. And so, each bite is more than cake, it is a return. As the call to Asr echoes over domes and into valleys, you find yourself holding a small cone of sesame brittle again. Someone handed it to you. You're not even sure who. You chew slowly, letting the sweetness bleed into your mouth, letting the stickiness hold your jaw just long enough to remember that Ottoman junk food never tried to impress. It never made promises it couldn't keep. It simply walked beside you, in the heat, in the dust, in the hunger, in the waiting. And if you let it, it gave you something no feast could offer, a moment that was yours alone. The afternoon shadows were growing long now, not with drama or spectacle, but with the kind of slow, indifferent grace that only ancient cities can master. The bricks, warmed earlier by the noon sun, were beginning to release their stored heat, sighing into the alleys, drifting through slatted windows, curling around ankles like invisible smoke. The city was shifting again, not towards sleep, not quite yet, but towards something in between. The second, quiet. The pause between the end of labor and the beginning of rest. And in that space, just as it had done before dawn and again at midday, Ottoman junk food emerged once more. But now it softened its voice, slowed its gestures, became more than snack, became something like a lullaby. Along the shoreline of the Bosphorus, where the breeze turned slightly cool and the water slapped against the stone docks with lazy persistence, a lone vendor pushed a small cart filled with dut sherbeti, mulberry syrup, not the kind poured into glass goblets in shaded gardens of viziers, but the street version, a sticky liquid diluted just enough to cool the throat, ladled into reused cups that clinked as they were passed around. The taste was deep and purple, heavy with the sweetness of overripe fruit, but behind it, something slightly sour, as though the drink had caught the memory of the earth where the berries once fell. Sailors drank it with one eye on the tide. Servants sipped it slowly, using rest as an excuse. Children begged for drops left at the bottom of the pot, and each of them, whether they noticed or not, walked away a little less heavy, a little more awake, or perhaps a little more ready for sleep. In a quiet lane just off the bookseller's street, where pages fluttered like birds and old men debated meanings no one could quite remember, a woman squatted beside a low table, assembling nana shekeri, mint sugar, rough crystals melted with crushed mint leaves and spread onto plates to cool before being broken into jagged, irregular pieces. She didn't even bother shaping them. People took them by the handful, a scatter of sharp, cold relief in the mouth. It burned in the nose, cleared the head. And yet in the mouth of someone just finishing a long fast, it tasted like mercy. It wasn't a meal, not even close, but it told the body, you are seen. You are not forgotten. Here is a little something, not to fill you, but to keep you from falling. In the southern quarter, where the stone arches still bore the faded calligraphy of long-gone benefactors, a boy crouched behind a brass tray filled with what he called gariban chure, the poor man's bun. It was truly a mystery of baking. Flat in places, puffy in others, made of yesterday's flour and leftover spice, studded with one or two black seeds, perhaps a single dried currant if one was lucky. He sold them for the price of a whisper, and even then he would sometimes give them away. They were dry, crumbly, but they made no promises, and that made them honest. And as people bit into them, tired mothers, coughing soldiers, bent-back porters, they didn't complain, because in a city where pride often cost more than bread, a bun that asked for nothing felt like a blessing. Beside the fountains of the mosque courtyard, where pigeons gathered not just for water, but for gossip, an old man was slicing paper-thin discs of tahinli churek, sweet sesame rolls. The swirl of tahini and sugar inside the dough was never even, never perfect. Some bites were too oily, some too dry, some made your tongue sing, but it was never dull. You'd sit under the carved stone colonnade, watching the shadow of a minaret stretch across the marble tiles, and slowly chew your slice. Flakes would fall onto your lap. The sugar would stick to your fingers, and you'd be grateful for something that didn't rush you. Later, in a narrow alley beneath strings of drying laundry and soft echoes of the evening call to prayer, a girl passed around cups of warm salep, made from the powdered root of a wild orchid, thickened with milk, dusted with cinnamon. You could drink it with one hand. Cradle the cup in your palms, let it fog your lips. It was not dessert, not drink, not quite comfort, but something in between. It clung to the throat, softened the lungs, reminded you that tomorrow might be cold, but tonight was still warm. And so it went, one food after another, not stacked or served or plated, just offered, sometimes passed in paper, sometimes on palms, Sometimes in silence, roasted chickpeas tossed with dried sumac, molasses-dipped bread fried in shallow oil and handed over with a grin, a pickle brined until it puckered, snapped between teeth with a sharp, wet joy. None of it lasted. None of it waited. Ottoman junk food was not a menu. It was a map, a way to move through hunger and memory, street and season, sorrow and small celebration, without ever needing to explain yourself. Because in a world where every corner of life demanded status, decorum, obedience, and purpose, this food asked only one thing. Are you here? Then eat. The light was dimming now. The sky not yet dark, but beginning to forget its brightness. People moved slower. Markets closed. Cats yawned in doorways. And somewhere, far from palaces and parchment and porcelain platters, someone bought a single bite of something fried and forgotten, and smiled. Because flavor in the Ottoman world was never just about taste. It was about time. And every time you let a brittle candy crack in your mouth, every time a sticky syrup dripped down your wrist, every time a pastry crumbled before it reached your tongue, you were reminded you are part of something, not royal, not famous, but ancient and enough. Night fell without warning. Not suddenly. No, Ottoman nights never collapsed like a curtain, but with such gentle certainty that the world didn't notice the moment it changed. One by one, the lamps flickered to life. Oil wicks danced behind colored glass. Smoke curled upward from the brass chimneys of tea shops and stalls. Even the cats, once prowling and proud, settled into folds of wool blankets left draped over merchant benches. The air had cooled now, but not cold. It was the kind of evening that brushed softly against the skin, that asked nothing of you except stillness, and maybe, just maybe, a final bite, because for all its grandeur, for all the pages of imperial kitchens and royal feasts, the Ottoman world always ended its day humbly, not with courses, not with ceremony, but with the smallest of sweets. Down. A winding stone stair that led toward the cisterns, a vendor still remained. He was old, older than the cart he leaned on. His table offered just one thing, insir tatlisse, stewed figs stuffed with crushed walnuts, then soaked in honeyed water until swollen and fragrant. There were only 5 left. You watched as a grandmother bought one, wrapping it delicately in a silk handkerchief. Then a courier arrived, panting, and handed over a coin in exchange for another. Then a beggar was offered one, not sold, just given, and he wept as he bit into it. You approached. The old man looked at you, nodded once, and handed you the 4th fig. No words, no change. You took a bite. It tasted like warmth that had been waiting all day just for you. A slowness that asked you to chew, to breathe, to exist, not as a subject or a buyer or a citizen, but simply as a body. Still here, still tasting. Not far from there, beyond the hammam whose windows were still fogged from the last bathers, a boy poured thick ribbons of pekmez, grape molasses, onto flat stones lined with crushed hazelnuts. He called them midnight. Zoitse. They were sticky, coarse. The molasses had begun to crystallize in parts, giving it a grainy crunch. But the sugar was deep, almost smoky, and the nuts gave it weight. He wrapped them in dried fig leaves and handed them to couples sitting near the mosque steps, to weavers closing up their shops, to a tired barber with blue-stained fingertips. They all ate in silence, because by this hour flavor wasn't a delight. It was a meditation. As you moved slowly through the closing city, past doorways hung with lanterns, you passed an alley filled with laughter. Not loud, not wild, just content. 3 young men, barely out of boyhood, were crouched around a fire, toasting skewers of kestein shekeri, sugar-glazed chestnuts. They didn't sell them. They didn't share them. They just toasted and ate, burning their fingers, laughing through the pain. The sugar sizzled, blackened slightly, cracked under teeth. It wasn't about the food, it was about the night, the stillness, the heat of the coal against the chill in the stone, the smoke curling through the stories they told each other in half words and sideways glances. Sometimes food did that, especially food without purpose. At the farthest edge of the bazaar, beyond the main arch near the tomb of a forgotten poet, a woman laid out tiny Susam lokmasa on a blue ceramic plate. Sesame. Bites. She made them herself, each one smaller than her fingernail. Flour, water, honey, a dash of spice, rolled, fried, dusted in crushed sesame. She did not speak. People came, took one, nodded in thanks, and walked away, chewing. They were so small that they vanished between teeth. But something lingered, a whisper of sweetness, a trace of nutty warmth, a flicker of being cared for, if only for a moment. That was the magic of Ottoman junk food. It did not fill you. It did not change your station. It did not write your name into the court records, but it told you, you are not alone. You are still part of something. Here is your peace. Just before the hour turned again, before the mosque lit its final lamp, and the taverns closed their shutters, you passed a man leaning against a tree. He held a pouch of kuru uzum, dried grapes. Nothing special, just raisins, but they had been soaked in rose water, then sun-dried again. Their skins glistened faintly. They smelled of memory. He poured a few into your palm. You ate them one by one, letting the sweetness unfold slowly, as if untying a ribbon. No one watched. No one applauded. And yet it felt holy. By the time you returned, to your own street, the door creaking as you opened it, the roof tiles whispering in the breeze, you realized you had not eaten a meal at all. You'd eaten time, eaten place, eaten the rhythm of a civilization that understood. Not all hunger is of the body, some is of the heart, some is of the past, and some is simply a longing for something small and good, given in quiet, eaten with fingers, and remembered long after. The taste is gone. This was Ottoman junk food, not a recipe. A ritual, a slow, crumbling, sticky kind of love, passed down in whispers and warmed over coals.